Don't look at me like that. She's just a friend. Mm-hmm. Welcome back to Veteran Idiot. I'm Art, and this is my buddy Nick's 2006 Silverado 2500 HD with a Duramax. This model here has got an LBZ, which is one of the most sought after versions of this Duramax. It was an upgrade from the LB7 and before all those emission things like DEF and everything else. And so performance mods for this truck are pretty easy and you're not really breaking any rules. So this truck here can make a lot of power in its stock version. I think the weak link is the Allison transmission, but if you get it rebuilt, you can really run a lot of power through them. So what we're doing for my buddy Nick here today is we're putting in an alternator, a new steering gearbox, some high pressure lines, low pressure lines, belts, a brake switch, and I think that's about it. But anyways, he's having some issues with leaks in the gearbox, and the steering gearbox itself has a lot of play in it. So we're going to fix that for him today, get this thing back out on the road so he can have fun with it. It actually really rips. It's got a ram air intake on it, Edge CTS display, and he's got a DSP-5 switch on the dash. I'm not sure exactly what tunes he's got going in it, but you click it all the way to over to 5 and you can't really keep the tires glued to the ground. But, it's a real cool truck, upgraded the mirrors. It is two-wheel drive, but I don't mind that at all. Alright, so let's get into it, see what we got under the hood. Alright, so what we got in here is he put a brand new brake booster in it, which is that Hydro Boost runs the power steering through help with the power brakes. But there's some issues with hooking up the lines, some of them leak and stuff like that, so we're going to replace them and take care of all that for him. Alternator is pretty simple, it's right up on top. I've had to change a couple CP3 pumps in these trucks, and it's kind of a pain in the ass. There's not a whole lot of room in here and all this stuff has to come off. But for the alternator, it's right up on top. We can take out, I think it's just the 2 bolts here. The belt's kind of a pain. Once you get your arms crammed down between the fins on this radiator shroud or fan shroud, it's not too bad. It sucks. Take care of the alternator first, get this belt off. That way if we need to pull the power steering pump out of the way to get to those lines, it'll be easy enough to do, and we won't be going back and doing several things over again. All right, let's get after it. I didn't have to take the fan shroud off, and I didn't have to loosen the fan guard and pull it back, but it makes it a lot easier to get to the tensioner down on the passenger side, because it's down behind everything and it's really hard to get a wrench on it to pull the tension out of the belt, take the belt off. So now that that's out of the way, we can pull the tension off, take the belt off, and start pulling this alternator out. I think I'm going to pull the power steering pump out anyways, just so I got easier access to everything, and then we'll start taking all that stuff apart. now that the fan's off, we'll go ahead and pull this alternator. It's got a plug on the back, and then there's a screwed in positive terminal on the back of it that we'll take off as soon as we get this out of the way. One of the first things we're going to do though is we're going to disconnect the battery, negative terminal on both sides, both batteries, and then we'll be able to pull this off. Alright, should be a couple 15mm bolts holding this on. It is. We'll take these off, get this out of the way. Something I've been thinking about recently is, you ever been taking pictures with your old lady for like family photos, or like at the ballpark or something like that, and you take a photo, and you take a photo, and you take a photo, and she goes, "Oh, this one's cute." It just occurred to me the other day that when she says, "Oh, this is cute," she doesn't mean that, oh, they're both of us are cute. No, she means that she looks cute in that photo. And you probably look like a 90-year-old man taking his granddaughter to the ballpark for the afternoon. But she looks cute. So the photo's cute. Hanging up a little bit. And so the alternator in this truck still works, but it's starting to make some noise. It's starting to make like this grinding, whining noise, and usually that's an indication it's probably time to get a new one. And they're really not that bad priced. I think these are about $200, $250, which can be a lot, but for these trucks, I think these are 200 amp, somewhere in that range, but they're big deal battery or alternators, and so they cost a little. Well, let's disconnect the batteries. Alright, so alternator's out. Sometimes they need a little help with the pry bar, get underneath it, pull it up out of the base. Then the plug just comes off, and this terminal on the back is just a 10mm nut. You take it off, put it on. I like to take all my nuts and bolts and put them right back where they came off, just so I don't lose anything. There isn't that confusion. I don't know why I've got a bunch of leftover, or I can't find anything that got kicked around on the floor. It's just a good habit to get into, to put them right back on where they came off. So now that that's out, we can throw the new alternator in and then start pulling this power steering pump out. Alright. Depending on the tolerances between the last alternator and this new one, you may have to take these sliding spacers and push them out a little bit. They suck in to meet the size on the alternator, and some of them are just like thousandths here, thousandths there difference, and you can't slide it down in, which is the case for this one. So we're going to take a little screwdriver and a hammer and just knock it forward just a little bit so we can get those in there. Alright, so new alternator's in, it's all plugged up. We'll put the belt on later because we're going to take the power steering pump off, so we'll pull that thing off right now. This one's a little bit more tricky. It's got 4 bolts. There's 3 on the front, 1 on the back, and there may even be 5 bolts, 1 down towards the bottom. Once you get those off, it slides off of this accessory mount, and then everything should be open. This may make it a little bit difficult to loosen the high pressure lines from the pump, since the pump's not in a secure position. But for me, it's just going to be easier to get at everything. Might be time to get a new compressor so I can use my air ratchet. Just saying. Harbor Freight. Anybody that wants to sponsor a new compressor? I made the mistake of selling off all my stuff when I went to North Carolina when I was stationed at Camp Lejeune. And now that I'm back here, starting all this up again, it would have been nice to have all that stuff. But I'll get it all back, piece by piece. You know, I know that Vice Grip Garage always jokes about Hobo Freight, Harbor Freight tools, and cheap they are, and stuff like that, and how they last forever. He's not really joking, to be honest. I've had snap-on wrenches, stuff like this. Like this ratchet has some teeth missing from it, but I have Harbor Freight wrenches that I've had for the last like 20 years, and they all still work perfectly. I think maybe one is broken in that time, whereas I've been in and out of swapping out Matco and snap-on wrenches and stuff like that. So I guess there's something to be said about that. This last bolt on this front side wants to play the game of too tight for the fingers, too loose for a ratchet. So power steering pump's out of its bracket, got the low pressure hoses disconnected from it and draining. Now that it's out of its bracket, I can tilt it forward and get to that high pressure line easier off of the back of it. Then we'll pull it off of the Hydro Boost up here. Then we'll work on dropping the gearbox. Steering gearbox it's not too bad. Recently I went through, changed out all the ball joints, the idler arm, pitman arm, all that stuff. So pitman arm should come off pretty easy. I have a puller for it. So we'll leave it connected to the center link. We'll just take the nut off, pull the pitman arm off, and swing it out of the way. And it's 3 bolts on the frame rail over here, and the gearbox drops out. Sometimes you have to take those 3 bolts out first, drop the gearbox down to be able to get the puller onto the pitman arm itself. But once that's off, then there's the steering shaft, which is 1 bolt, and then it slides off the steering shaft and the gearbox drops out. It's heavy as hell, so be prepared for that. There's a difference between this. Some are 30 spline, some are 32 spline. I think we got 32 spline, which was one of the only for this year, so we should get lucky with it. I think there's a difference between the 4-wheel drive and 2-wheel drive, but we'll get that dropped out after this. So I'm going to go ahead and start pulling off these high pressure lines from the pump and from the Hydro Boost, and then we'll start working on the underside with the gearbox. I'm going to drink some water first, it's a little hot. So it's probably going to be hard to tell, but now that I got the pump and everything out of the way and those lines, we're going to change out those high pressure lines down there. So that's what we'll get at now. Alright, so I couldn't really show you what I was doing with the high pressure and return line on the gearbox, taking it off and such. There's not really any room for cameras or anything down there. But I got those 2 lines off, got it all sprayed off with brake cleaned up, took the steering shaft off. It's just 1 bolt that runs down through, it's keyed, slide it off. Now we're going to take these 3 bolts off the side. I'll show you what those look like in a second. But take 3 bolts off the side, gearbox is going to drop down, and it'll be hanging essentially from that pitman arm. We can pull it forward and out of the way just a little bit. May have to jack up the truck to turn the wheels to get the center link to allow us to get some room. But then we'll hook on our pitman arm puller, hook that up on there, tighten it down, pop it off, pull it out, throw in the new one. Alright, so here's what I was talking about with the 3 bolts that are holding the gearbox in. It's these 3 21mm bolts. You'll take those out and the gearbox will drop down, and that way we can get to the pitman arm. gonna do a screeching halt on this one. Turns out my 50% chance of getting the right gearbox was 50% wrong. So one that I have has 4 different key positions or key slots, and the one that came out of the truck has 3, so it doesn't fit back in. Got another one ordered up. I'm gonna go pick it up tomorrow, and we'll pick up with this tomorrow. So right now I'm gonna go watch the Suns game and relax. Alright, welcome back to day 2 of the 2006 Silverado HD. Got a God's peach juice ready to roll this morning. Went and picked up the other gearbox. It's a 33 spline that we needed, and so we'll slam that in, get the rest of this put back together. And I think I want to help them out with something. The drive shaft is clunking on here when you give it a little bit of gas off of a start and when you're stopping. So I'm going to pull that 2-piece drive shaft apart. Sometimes they get dry between the two, or put some grease in there, slide it back together. That should get rid of that thunk. And I think that's about it. And this thing's ready to go. Actually, no, we got a brake switch we got to try and figure out. But that's it, because I got stuff to do. I got trees to trim, I got horses to feed. Maybe I can drag this out a little longer. Alright, so what we're looking at here is I've got the pitman arm still attached to the center link. I jacked up this driver's side tire so I could turn it in or tow it in to push the center link forward, and I can get the input shaft into the pitman arm. So the next thing is just to bench press this thing up in there and line it up, which is so much fun. It's also pretty hard on the fingertips. Get them in between the frame rails and stuff. Once you get it up there, slides right into the pitman arm. And now we can throw the nut on, and it has a lock washer that comes with it. Usually a lock washer, in some models you're gonna have to replace it with every use. This particular one springs back and it's good to go, so we can reuse it. So anyways, we'll slide that on, we'll tighten it down, crank it as much as the impact will give it. We'll get it back over to my cousin's house where he's got a compressor that we can hit it with a good impact wrench. It's kind of hard to torque with a torque wrench. It wants to turn the wheels. If you can figure out how to chock them or lock them and then hit it with the torque wrench, you can hit it to the exact specifications, but you give it about 35 ooga doogas on a good impact wrench and you're good to go. All right. Headphone people, cover your ears. Mini pause for safety. I should have been wearing some safety glasses for that. Pretty dangerous. But we survived. I safety squinted the hell out of that. So this next part is a lot easier if you got a buddy to help you out, because now the gearbox needs lifted up, pushed into place, and the bolts started. So what I'll have to do is I'll have to push this driver's side tire back out to line the center link back up. But first I'm going to hook up the steering shaft, so that's not a big deal, and it's going to help kind of align the gearbox as we're trying to bolt it in. Now, I'm going to push this tire out. I'll push that center link back into place. And now we're pretty close to lined up. So we can slide at least one of the bolts in, maybe a couple of them, and get it bolted up. And then the gearbox will be in. And we just got to hook up the high pressure, low pressure lines, put the power steering pump back in, and cross all that stuff off of our to-do list. It's really good for the biceps, pec muscles, and the blood pressure to the brain. I already put a little bit of glue on these bolts, anticipating the lock thread or Loctite, Loctite. That way this thing doesn't work its way back off of the frame rail, and then you're driving like Helen Keller down the highway. All right, and we can get up here and tighten them down. All right, we're back at these 3 bolts holding the gearbox on. I already got them threaded in some, so we're gonna hit it with the impact, tighten her down. Warning headphone users again, this is gonna be really loud. Kind of cinched up in each spot so we're not bound up. This next part's gonna be kind of hard for you guys to see, so I'm just gonna kind of skip through it. But I'm gonna be bolting down those high pressure lines and low pressure lines to the top of the gearbox right here, and then run them up to the top, and once I get it back up top, we'll continue recording. High pressure line and low pressure line down on the gearbox are on. Now we gotta run this high pressure line up to the Hydro Boost on this side, over here, driver's side. And then when we put the pump back in, that high pressure line will run up to the passenger side of the Hydro Boost. Pretty simple. Just gotta fish it up through here, get it up on the right side. Go, make sure the O-ring's still on there. Get a little juice on it. Now careful, you don't want to cross-dress these, because you're going to have a bad day. End up replacing this whole unit. No bueno. This fitting up here is a 16 millimeter, in case you're wondering if anybody is actually going out to change one of these anytime soon. Use the old flip-floppy every tourney method, since there's only like 10 degrees of swing. And these have to be pretty decently tight, but careful with them. You don't want to pull threads. There's enough in there to hold it all up, but still, like I said, expensive. No one a screwy uppy. Okay, it's time to put this power steering pump back in. Oh. All right, got a couple bolts in place, getting this third one in down here. That way we got something to hold it up with while we get this low pressure line on, and that high pressure line bolted up there. What the hell? What's going on here? What in the H-E double hockey stick? What's going on with this bottom bolt? Cut my arm all up on this freaking fan shroud. This bottom bolt doesn't want to exist with the rest. I don't understand. Why? Why don't you want to go? That's weird, but it's in. All right, they're all cinched in. Cool. Slide this low pressure line on. Apologize if you can't see a whole heck of a lot, but don't worry, I can't either. So we got all that stuff put in. I got the bolts in place for the power steering pump. They're just kind of loose right now till I can get everything else in there. Got the low return line clamped on. It seems a little loose. Maybe we'll keep a check on that. Maybe that line has to be replaced too. Replaced everything else though. So the battery terminal gets bolted back on. I've got to put this high pressure line up here. And we should be good to start putting the belt on. Home stretch now. Power steering pump's back in, all the lines are run. I'm going to prime it later when we get it all hooked up. Actually, you know what? Prime it first and I'm going to spin the pulley to push it through. But we got to get the belt back on. Don't worry if you don't remember how it came back off. There are plenty of pictures all over forums, all over Google. Just look it up. It'll show you a diagram. Just follow that diagram around. But most of the belt stays on the top of these engines. It goes down to the crank, comes back around power steering, the air conditioner down to a idler pulley, back across, and then down to the tensioner and fan. So it's not too bad, but it is pretty tight in there, so it's kind of a pain. Radiator cover's back on. Belt's back on. Power steering pump's back on. High pressure lines are back on. I need to drain some brake fluid out of here. This thing's over full, kind of coming out. It's time to start the truck. So the belt's seat completely and circulating this power steering fluid, and then we can start filling it up, pushing all the air out of it. No leaks immediately. We'll cycle the steering wheel back and forth, try and push some of that air out of the gearbox and hydro boost and everything else. So I'm working it through back and forth, get the air out. Alright, so I'm just going to keep doing that for a little while, and then we'll button it up and take a look inside, see if we can figure out this brake switch for him, and then we'll take a look at the drive shaft. Alright, so the brake switch is right there. It's held on by that little clip. Kind of hard to see from this angle. Trying to do my best with this. This clip holds it on. Pull that clip, the brake arm comes off, and then you slide the whole brake switch off of the brake arm. I'm going to replace that for him. It's not doing what it's supposed to, doing some clicking noises. Sometimes you can't get it out of park, and sometimes the brake lights stay on. So we'll get that switched out for him real quick. Brake switch is out. As you can tell, it's old. It was just its time to go. Got a new one over here in his bag, straight out of the GM factory. We'll go ahead and put that, Heco in Mexico, we'll put that in.
A few moments later.
So I went to put in the new one and it's reversed. So when you put it in, the brake lights stay on the entire time. And obviously we don't want that. So I took apart the old one. I'm taking out these contacts and I'm cleaning them up, putting them back in. Basically how this works is there's a plunger inside that slides back and forth and forces contacts to pull away or to contact in the back here. All we gotta do is put it back together now. Watch out for this spring that's in here. It will kill you when it flies out. Probably won't kill you, but it hurt really bad. Switch is back in. Let's see if the fruits of our labor were fruitful. Oh, there we go. See if we can get it out of park. Shazam. Alright, so one of the last things that I want to do for Nick is I want to pop this drive shaft apart, slide it out of the front portion of the drive shaft, this two-piece drive shaft. This section usually dries out and then it just clunks. It sticks and it clunks. So when you pull up and you stop, it'll settle and clunk in. And then when you go to take off from a stoplight, it'll pull out and clunk out. So we're gonna separate these guys, shoot some grease down in there, shove it back in there. And that should get rid of that clunking in this drive shaft. So the first thing you gotta do to get this accomplished is we gotta take this clip off. So we'll stretch out this crimp. It'll pop off of the finger on this side, pop it out, try and push the boot back a little bit. Sometimes you can push it back enough to where you can squirt grease in there and it'll be all right, but I want to actually slide it off, grease the inside splines, and slide it back on. Alright, so that's off. Pull it back. Now we undo the U-joint in the back. Slide it out and grease it up. Sometimes these are clocked. I don't think this one has a key to keep it in the right direction. Actually, it looks like it is keyed. Don't have to mark it, but if it is something that isn't keyed and you do have to put in correctly, you want to keep the U-joints facing the same direction all the way down. If the U-joints aren't facing the same direction, it'll tend to wobble and spin at different speeds at the U-joints. So keep them in line. When you go to put it back in, you'll be good to go. Alright, it's 10mm bolts. JK, not 10mm. Maybe 11 or 12. 11mm bolts, and these will come right out. These caps. So the fun thing about this is that the top ones are going to be in a difficult position. The drive shaft comes up, so it kind of blocks this side. So you get your 11mm wrench, pop them out, loosen them out. Sometimes you can't get the bolt all the way out, so you'll have to put the truck in neutral, roll it a little bit, expose these, and which is exactly what I'm going to do because I don't feel like fiddling with a wrench. So neutral, roll a little bit, take these out with the impact. Now those bolts were exposed, I was able to pull them off. These U-joints, it's really tight tolerance, so you just get a little pry bar behind, pop out. It'll slide forward, drop down, and then slide out. Just get the pry bar in here, pop it out. There we go. I guess now is as good a time as any for a pause for safety. If you're going to pull off the only thing keeping the truck from rolling downhill, you might want to use some chalk blocks or a piece of wood or something, or another person in front of the wheels to keep from running you over. That's it. Got done everything that we wanted to get done, This will be a little bit of a longer video. It's more complicated. This is something that somebody else is really going to be doing more so than the older trucks. The older trucks are far less complicated than these things. Tight, no space to do anything at all, hoses everywhere. So I want to show you guys up close and every step of the way. This truck runs good. It's going to run good for a long time from now. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. Let me know some other stuff you want to see. I'm open to finding some new projects. We got a lot of things coming up, some cool stuff, some really cool cars, and maybe some shows later on towards the end of the year, middle end of the year, beginning of fall. So with that being said, thanks for coming along. I'll see you on the next one.